G'day fishers, welcome to another episode of WA Fishing. Today we're going to do something a little bit different other than fishing videos. We're going to take you through some of the weather applications, the pros and cons, and what we use to dictate our fishing trips. I'll also explain why we use particular applications without getting too technical and too boring for you people out there. Weather is one of the most unpredictable factors, and yet it's so important for our future fishing trips to ensure you get out there safely and have a successful day on the water. Okay, before we get into the applications themselves, let's talk about the two different forecasting systems. First one being BOM, Bureau of Meteorology, and the second one being the Global Forecast System, otherwise GFS. The big question, which forecasting system is better? Technically, neither. They're both very good systems to forecast your weather. Not one is better than the other, despite whatever technical specifications you can find online. You hear it all about different resolutions, you hear about different systems. BOM is a local platform, and GFS is more of an international platform, but neither is better than one another, despite what rumours you may hear. My personal opinion on the two, I believe BOM is better for the short range forecast, like in the next few days. However, GFS I do find tends to be a bit more on point for those longer range forecasts, say 10 days or more. Obviously this may vary for you at home, depending on what state you're in and where you live. But that's my personal opinion. Something to keep in mind is that BOM makes the applications pay for provisions of using their forecast system, which can be transferred to you at home, and really is it worth it for some of us. Again, that depends on what type of fishing you do, whether or not these two systems are fit for you. Now let's talk about which application is the best. Now before I get started, I'm not sponsored or affiliated with any applications I'm going to talk to today. This is just my personal opinion and hopefully my experience that can help you at home planning your next fishing trip. Okay, what are the key elements to a good weather application? For me, there's 5 things. There's wind, swell, tides, currents, and seas. For this video, we're not going to touch on currents because there's a lot of applications and a lot of deeper understanding there, and plus most of us aren't deep droppers. So for me, I use currents, yes, when I go deep dropping. And if you're interested in what applications I use there, you can always contact us on our socials, Instagram or Facebook, and we can discuss that a little bit more in detail. Okay, let's start with tides and swell. These two are really relatively easy to predict and should be very similar. It doesn't matter what application you use, and therefore not much variation between them. One of the key things for swell is the direction and the frequency. Just keep that in mind, that depending on your location, these can make a difference to your fishing and also the conditions that are out there. So keep that in mind when you go out there to understand what's your limitations on swell and what frequency, and also not to forget what swell direction. Generally speaking, for the metro area that, I fish mostly in, it comes from the southwest, and that can impact some of the seas, which we'll discuss a bit later in this video. Now let's touch on wind. Wind is probably one of the key factors for a successful fishing trip. You'll hear me in this video talk about offshore and inshore. When I talk about offshore winds, it's talking about winds that are further out, say 10 kilometers or further. And for me, I'm an offshore fisherman. I do predominantly, a lot of my fishing is 10 Ks or further. Then there's inshore, which is 10 Ks or less. So basically from land to that 5 fathom bank, if you're in this sort of metro area, those inshore winds. Hope that makes sense. So when we go through these applications, depending on your fishing conditions, they may be more suitable for you. Okay, let's start off with the top 4 applications. And first off the rank is Seabreeze. Seabreeze has been around for a long time, great application, good visuals to understand which direction it's coming in. However, it's inshore. So if you're an inshore fisherman, really great. However, it doesn't facilitate weather forecasts that are 10 kilometers or further offshore. So you may find that the variations do occur when you start fishing offshore, and their system that they use is the BOM. So really great for short range. Long range, it changes a lot, you may find. Let's go with number 2, WillyWeather. Really great application. Been around for a long time also. However, limitations is very similar to Seabreeze. It uses BOM. It facilitates inshore forecasting. However, it does not facilitate offshore forecasting. So once again, you can have variations in the forecast that you see offshore than to what's inshore. And I'll explain a bit more later on. Okay, let's now talk about the third application, windy. For me, this is one I do use. It's a great application. It uses the Global Forecasting System, or GFS, and it facilitates offshore and inshore, which is really great if you're going out fishing deeper. Like I said, you can see those forecasting systems, plus it provides a great visualization of the wind direction, which I'll show you in the application in a moment. Now the last application is BouyWeather. BouyWeather is very similar to windy. It uses GFS and it provides offshore forecasting ability. So really great for those people, once again, going offshore. Now, I know I said there's 4, but the one that I personally use, and you see me screenshot a lot on my socials if you follow me there, is Fish Ranger. Now, why do I use Fish Ranger? Fish Ranger was started up by an individual who basically saw there was an opportunity to bring the two systems together, so that's being BOM and GFS, and provide not only inshore but also offshore forecasting ability. So basically all these applications that you can be used into one. Now this application I do pay for, and it is well worthwhile in my opinion, because it does provide really good 10-day forecasts using both those systems and offshore, which enables me to forecast very well for my fishing trips. Now you're probably wondering, why do I still use windy as well? Well, windy provides a good visualization map of the forecasting system, and having that bird's eye view of the forecasting system enables you to see where the wind changes and how that system changes within the day, so you can better plan your day out in the water. So let's go through an example where I use Fish Ranger and windy in conjunction to forecast, say, an upcoming fishing trip. Okay, so this is the Fish Ranger app, and today's the first day of the demersal ban lift. And as I spoke about, you can choose locations that are offshore, which is fabulous. If we have a look here, you'll see that selects my onshore location, which is, everybody typically has Warnbro Sound, but say we wanted a offshore location, you can actually search offshore locations that are available in the application. So you can see here, you can go right out to the trench and say, look up the FADs in this case, and you can get a weather forecast up to 10 days of that particular location. So if we scroll down, you'll see that the wind patterns are there for both the BOM and the GFS, which I spoke about. Now this is a fabulous option to have, as you don't need to run multiple applications, it's all in one. Now you can see that the variation between the BOM and the GFS is actually quite different. You can see that on Wednesday, for instance, we've got winds that are almost up to, say, 30 knots. Well, meanwhile, the BOM is only forecasting less than that. Now further down on the application, you got wind wave, which is your seas, your primary swell and your secondary swell. So in storms you will see a secondary swell, and then your total wave and the direction and the frequency, which you typically get on most applications. There's also temperature, cloud cover, rainfall, air pressure, tides. For those who follow it, the solar lunar calendar, and sun elevation, humidity and dew. So pretty much everything that you need. One of the little nifty things with this application, you can actually go Wind 3D. Now, Wind 3D gives you areas around your area. So I've got the FAD selected here, but it will show me Rottnest Island, Swanbourne, and other locations and how they vary. So you can see here offshore, which is, Rottnest Island, and I guess the FADs could be classed as offshore. But if you look here, these are onshore locations such as Hillary's. They're quite substantially different in terms of their forecasts, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to inshore and offshore variances, and how typically some of these applications such as Seabreeze and WillyWeather, they don't have offshore ability. So you may think it's good out there, but actually, in actual fact, when you do head out, it's much worse. So say on WillyWeather, you selected Garden Island as an example, which is, in my opinion, is inshore. You went, oh yeah, it's less than 15 knots for the most of the day. Meanwhile, off at the FADs, it's actually probably close to the 25 knots. So it's substantially different. And that may spoil your day when you're out there on the water. Anyhow, I hope this helps. There's a lot more features in this application that I won't go through, but I just wanted to explain the differences here. Okay, now let's contrast it to, say, Windy. So why I use Windy in collaboration with Fish Ranger. So I click the map in the top right-hand corner, and this gives me a full visibility of how that weather forecast is being interpreted offshore. So as I spoke about inshores, say you're fishing offshore around the FADs again, which is out, I guess, in this location roughly, but you took off Fremantle's forecast at that particular time, you can see that the winds are substantially less because of that easterly. Now, when I do a forecast, I generally look at this and say I was forecasting for the day at this particular time, which I'm not, because it's 8 o'clock at night, but say I was fishing off Rockingham and I saw that it was really good forecasts at my particular location. Now, all these stars are just, by the way, are just my locations that I'll look at depending on where I'm fishing, down Mandurah, Bunbury Way, or up Rockingham. But you can see that whole bunch of red. So if I was to go take, say, fish off Mandurah, and I decided I wanted to head west from Mandurah, I'm going to hit a bit of stronger easterlies than if I was to head, say, in a southerly southwest direction. So I would plan my trip on this particular day to head southwest if I was leaving Mandurah and get in that nice pocket of slow moving air, I should say. Nice pocket of slow moving air. Now, I hope that makes sense, what I'm talking about when I'm forecasting weather patterns and my winds in preparation for my fishing trip. Now, before I move off wind and forecasting and the applications, one of the most important factors of wind is the direction. Now, for those residing in WA, particularly around the metro area for me, easterlies do provide protection for those inshore fishermen. However, if you're offshore, easterly winds themselves can pick up speed the further you go offshore, which is the opposite again for inshore. So if it's westerly, generally speaking, offshore is a bit better than what it is inshore, as that wind picks up speed as that approaches the landmass. For me, the best wind conditions there are generally come from the west or the south, as they flatten out the ocean because they're the same direction as the swell. Wind direction that sucks, north and east, because they oppose the swell, which creates bigger seas and also rocks the boat back and forth in different directions. And again, it's going to make you quite seasick if you have a weak stomach. Now, whilst the wind may be pumping from the westerly or southerly, predominantly westerly, southwest It may be choppy, but it's not going to, seas aren't going to pick up that much. So you're not going to be in unsafe conditions as that wind picks up later in the afternoon, say with the Frio Doctor, for instance. Probably the most important forecast, seas. It's often overlooked by most. We always look at the wind, we always look at the swell, but seas for me is probably the most important forecast you should be looking at before you go out fishing on the water. Seas is basically translated to roughness out there on the water. Now most weather applications do mention seas in their verbal description, or written description I should say, but the beauty about Fish Ranger, it gives you a great visualization of how those seas change throughout the day, so you can better plan your trip out there for the day on the water or in the future. Now despite Fish Ranger having the forecast ability for seas, it still can be very unpredictable, and those seas can change significantly depending on swell, wind direction, tides even. So something to consider before you go in the water, and I'm going to show you what I do to forecast those seas much more accurately. So what I personally use to forecast with the seas is a combination of two things, is Fish Ranger and also a website. Believe it or not, Transperth, our government website, it actually has buoys offshore, particularly around Rottnest and up north during Bay and Mandurah, that actually measuring the seas in the swell direction for you at home, so you can actually better forecast and see what's actually happening out in the water despite what's on your application. Generally speaking, anything 0.5 meters or below is a bit of a glass off day. Really great conditions, potentially one of the best days you're going to have on the water. Between 0.5 and 1 meter is starting to typical fishing day, not so rough, but it's actually a bit of seas out there, bit of drift, maybe uncomfortable for those who have weak stomachs. And then there's over 1 meter up to 1.5 meters, which is starting to get really rough seas and quite dangerous. Now for me, if it's above 1.2, 1.3, I do not go out in the water because I like my back, how it is, and my joints and my knees. And also I don't want to die. And I would prefer those, when you're using this system, do not go out say above 1.3, 1.4, unless you know your boat and you know the conditions very well. So let's now go through an example where we use the Fish Ranger web application in forecasting seas in conjunction with the Transport website. Okay, let's look at the seas. Now I'm going to use Jurien Bay because currently the Rottnest buoy is out of action. So Jurien Bay, we can scroll down and we look at the seas. On this particular day today, the 16th, you can see that the seas started out at about 1 meter and they sort of dropped throughout the day to 0.5 meters. So what I'm going to be looking for is contrasting that to the buoy that's off Jurien Bay, I should say, and see if that's actually quite accurate. And if it's not, just judge as a bit of an offset where that's sitting. So if we jump across to the buoy, and as you can see here, for this particular day, it started out at 1 meter, and it's just under 1 meter, the sea that is, and it's dropped right down below 0.5 meters. So in contrast to the application, you can see that that is actually fairly accurate forecast. So if I'm looking to go fishing, say tomorrow, I know the seas are going to be about 0.5 meter and most certainly below 1 meter, which is absolutely fishable. The only thing that probably has me suspect is that northeasterly. So it's an east-northeaster, and that makes it quite uncomfortable offshore and can actually increase those seas quite significantly. So it could jump up a bit, but it won't be unsafe, that's for sure. Anyhow, I hope that proves useful, and how I contrast the buoys to the sea forecast in the Fish Ranger app, and just make sure that the fishing trip that I'm going to embark on is actually going to be a comfortable one. Now before we finish off this video, another consideration is if you're out deep dropping, the seas and the swell is much larger than forecast. So keep that in mind. Fish Ranger does account for that if you put your pin or your marker well offshore. but just keep that in mind. Now lastly, before we sign off, please do not go out in conditions that are outside your comfort zone. Now if you like this video, please like and comment, as it helps others like yourself find this video. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe and be notified of future videos by clicking the bell, and stay up to date with the latest information that we're providing on this channel. And thanks for watching, Fishers. We'll see you next time.